All right, recording has started, and this is the February 10th, 2022 Crossplane community meeting. Feel free to continue adding yourselves to the attendees list here. Mafik, you've got that special resolved attendee functionality there. You're the most special one on the list so far. Nice work.
Thanks.
All right. And then, so now we can start talking as usual about milestones and upcoming releases, etc. So we are now in the midst of the timeline for the 1.7 release. We typically have a 2-month cadence for all of our releases. You can always follow along with expected and upcoming releases in the schedule here at Crossplane on the main README there in the releases section. So a quick note there is that we typically have been doing releases near the end of months, like around the low 20s of a month. The last release that kind of coincided with a lot of holiday breaks, so we pushed it to the beginning of the month, beginning of the year here around early January, like January 4th or 5th or so. And so that kind of shifted the release time frame for everything else now. And so I think we'll probably do that going forward, but we erroneously had the 1.7 release mentioned or listed for the end of March when it's actually would be the beginning of March every 2 months, beginning of January, beginning of March. So that was a mistake and we're rectifying that there. But there is a bit of a discussion here because the general theme for 1.7 here is that we're kind of undertaking some massive features. We're getting back in the swing of putting investments into large-scale features that are in high demand by the community. So that's super exciting to be having a rich roadmap that we're executing on. But a lot of these won't be making it into a 1.7 release. So Nick brought up a valid question here on if we should continue with the 1.7 release or not. I was looking, Nick, I don't know if you looked at it too, but when I looked at the commits and such that are in main branch that would be part of a 1.7 release, I think that at least the vast majority of those have all been backported to 1.6 and with the releases there. So I don't know of the delta between main and 1.6, but I think a lot of them are in 1.6. Did you look into that more deeply yourself, Nick?
Not much more deeply, but I did have a quick skim, and what you saw matches what I saw. There's nothing in there at the moment that I'm aware of that would count towards a warrants a 1.7 release. So it's an interesting question generally. Like I feel like we've had a lot of movement happening at providers lately with everyone having been investing in TerraJet and other things. But then core Crossplane has kind of slowed down the last couple of releases, and we've had like 1 or 2 things in each release. I've started to question the sort of cadence that we have of releasing every 8 weeks, given that we don't have a ton in each of these releases. I wonder if it's time to drop down to like 3 times a year or something like that, which is kind of a bigger question. So I guess, one thing is, do we course correct the mistake that I made when I wrote that this would be released on March 22 when it should have actually been released on March 1st? If it's March 22, I feel slightly better about like the thing that Sergen and I are working on, which is custom compositions. No guarantees, but I feel slightly better about that being in 1.7 as an alpha, very, very early feature. If it's due on March 1st, I just don't think there's a hope of that being in.
Yeah, there are also a few other features as well that we could get into the 1.7. I think Hassan is working on external secret stores. I'm not sure if it's gonna make it to that time, but for webhooks that I'm working on, I believe we would be able to have a provider using that functionality from Crossplane runtime and package manager and everything, having some kind of webhook like immutability check, etc. So I would be in favor of doing that change.
But just to be clear,
sorry, go ahead, Nick.
You go ahead first, Hassan, and then I will ask my question.
Okay, I will just ask, like, we are talking about postponing or delaying it to March 22, like the release day. And I think 2 weeks before is feature freeze. So we are kind of like talking about making it ready for the first week of March, right? So
yeah.
So in that case, I would totally be in favor of that, and I would like give it a try to make an initial alpha release of external secret stores, even like we couldn't roll out to all providers. Maybe just like Monfak mentioned, we can at least have it for one provider and get some early feedback.
Yeah, so I think sounds like you're in the similar place to me as custom compositions. I think the other thing to remember here is that increasingly these days, features that ship as part of a provider are not things that we really include in the Crossplane release cycle. So the provider releases are decoupled from Crossplane releases. And, we don't really consider some providers having a feature to be like a thing that is associated with Crossplane 1.7. So I know that for secret stores, part of that will affect core Crossplane as well, because we need to do that for the composite resources and whatnot. Custom compositions definitely going in 1.7. It sounds like webhooks might be more of a provider end thing than something that's built into core. Uvaf, what do you think of that?
Yes, but I believe we have immutable fields on our core Crossplane CRDs as well, so we could apply that there too.
Yeah, makes sense. All right.
And Wapik, you said there would be package manager changes though as well to like deploy maybe the infrastructure that's needed for like webhooks and like some of the commonality there, or I'm not up to speed on the architecture, so I might be wrong about that.
Yeah. In fact, that is like I think the biggest thing that will go to core Crossplane, because we have to make sure the provider is deployed with a CA certificate so that it can accept webhook requests from the API server.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
I only have one thing in this milestone, and it's just adding the support for the annotations to be able to specify a layer in your package image, which supports the provider FAT packages, which I'm not concerned about getting in on any of these dates, really, because it's not a huge change. That being said, and this may be somewhat in contrast to what some folks have said, but I would advocate for us going ahead and having the conversation about formally changing the release process to trimesters or something like that, rather than making a one-time exception. I think that does a better job of communicating to the community when things are going to arrive. I'm a little nervous about saying like, well, this one is going to be a little bit later. And obviously there's context around that. But I think having a reliable release date and not necessarily changing it when folks may be expecting, a small bug fix or something like that, or a feature that was seems minor to others. Basically having some reliability around when things are going to be released and not get delayed for, some features that an individual or a group or something like that wants.
So I broadly agree, but given the context around this, where for many weeks now, for the whole time, the thing has said March 22nd, and I don't think anyone but maintainers have noticed that date was incorrect. So just to be clear here, if folks, just to be explicit, it should have been due on March 1st. We release in 8-week cycles. When I did the math to figure out what was 8 weeks after the last release, somehow I added a bunch of weeks and wrote down March 22nd. So it's just a mistake on my part, but that is the date that we committed to. That is the date that's been written down. So while it's not 8 weeks, I imagine that most folks probably are expecting March 22nd rather than having, been like, wait a second, and like mathed it and been like, that's a wrong date. So I feel pretty good about just keeping March 22nd personally, especially because it gives us that little bit of extra wiggle room to maybe get some more stuff into this release, ramping up out of the holidays and the start of the year and whatnot. A lot of companies, including my own, are doing Q1 planning that slows things down. But I agree with Dan that I would also this is not the first time we've had a release of Crossplane in recent months that has been only had 1 or 2 big features in it, sort of thing. I think we have slowed down and hit the point where there's just not that much changing in Crossplane core. Don't get me wrong, we have great ideas. There's many more features to come. We want bug fixes in there, et cetera, but it's not the pre 1.0 days where there's 700 new features in every release. So I personally would push for changing to every to a trimester based release cycle.
Yeah.
Do you think that we had discussed this in the past though, and there was kind of a feeling that we're just on the cusp of a bunch of people spending much more time on core Crossplane, having especially from the folks, those of us who work at Upbound, we're busy with TerraJet, and they've got that in a sort of a decent state sort of thing, and are sort of looking for other work to do. So I feel like last time we discussed this, which I forget what forum was in, there was a bit of a sense of like, no, we want to keep the 8-week releases because we do actually feel like we're going to be wanting to ship stuff pretty swiftly.
Yeah, I think it sounds like it's a bit of an open question, but just to I guess be clear where I stand, I don't feel good about March 22nd as a date because that seems like a cadence that we would never do. Like that's like 10 or 11 weeks or something like that. So unless we think we're going to do that, I'd advocate for bumping it out to like later than that to be online with our new schedule. Obviously, that's just one person's opinion, but just wanted to be clear about what I was saying there.
Can you help me understand what effect you think doing March 22nd has? Do you think that
it's an arbitrary date in my mind that's not communicated on some sort of schedule or cadence or anything like that? So if we are making the decision to go to a trimester schedule, that would not be on the trimester schedule, right? That would just be like a in-between date.
But the date is communicated, it's written down on our README in our release schedule. That's why we were talking about sticking with it. Accidentally, it's the wrong date, but it is what's committed to at the moment.
Yeah, I get that kind of like strategy as well. I guess I'm also looking at like we have written down elsewhere that we release every 8 weeks and that sort of thing, which that would also be incorrect if we move to the trimester, you know, so point taken for sure. I think, yeah, I guess I would want us to maybe explore at least going to the trimester now if we think that's what we're going to do. But
and I'd actually be probably not in favor of going to a trimester schedule because things are ramping back up and more, you know, commitments and features are being, you know, dedicated to right now. So I'd actually want to keep the same, you know, like if March 22nd, that was what was put down. That's what we've been kind of publishing and stick with that. That's okay for me. But then from there, then keep the same published cadence of 8-week cycle after that, because I feel like the velocity is picking up again.
Gotcha. In that context, I think potentially that would make sense then. Yeah. So I don't know. It's an open question, I guess, sort of. I just want us to maybe consider what we're going to do and let that maybe play into the decision we make here.
Yeah. I feel pretty sold on keeping March 22nd unless anyone else strongly dissents with that. I'm not as convinced that sticking with 8-week release cycles makes sense, just having seen us go through 3 to 4 releases with that are pretty light on the ground. I don't really want to make the decision in this meeting, though. I do wonder if there's some way to do effectively a 1-pager or some kind of, you know, something somewhat data driven to figure out like how, you know, whether it would significantly impact anyone, a community survey or something like that to you know, see if changing the release frequency might make sense.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the similar page with Jared. I think March 22 is fine because we communicated it. But I would also like, you know, be in favor of more like the 8 weeks cadence essentially, and to see like, you know, because like, you know, to see, hey, like, you know, we are at 8 weeks and we're still not investing or something. So, but like that would not be the change now, and we already have like, you know, new features plated. So yeah, I think the next step for the cadence would be to open an issue and discuss it there.
Okay, well, one way we could address this, yeah, I'll open an issue and maybe we can set a check-in date effectively to say that in a quarter from now or 6 months from now, if we look back and we really have only been shipping like a feature with each release or something, maybe then, you know, basically if we don't see the acceleration that we're forecasting that we'll see over the next couple of releases, then then maybe we should consider slowing down to trimester release cycles. I also want to say as well, like it's totally fine to slow down to trimester release cycles, right? If I understand, like Kubernetes did this, Stan, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And like it happens, right? Like when you're post 1.0, like you're not just launching like headline new feature like every release sort of thing, every like, you know, couple of weeks. So I think it is totally fine to slow down as well on this. I'll take an action to go and just put a tracking issue for us to come back and reassess in, let's say 6 months or something.
So we decide March 22nd for this one and future discuss any changes to Cadence.
Yeah, we'll basically do
Cool.
March 22nd, then we'll just reset to the normal 8 weeks after that. We'll just be like, whoops, we put in a wrong date, but you know,
Cool.
it's
I'm
kind
not sure. I'm not sure if I changed my opinion or if this is aligned with it, but I now feel very good about March 22nd. So please proceed. Please ignore me.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, cool. So then let's commit to that then, and we'll stick with it. This will also, I was going to try to spell serendipitously. Let's just keep that word out of this completely. Enable early alpha features to be included. Okay. Okay, cool. So I think, we can pick up the pace a little bit here. But yeah, so, some of the big things here that we've talked about are on the roadmap here, such as custom compositions that are getting Sergen and Nick dedicated to that right now. External secret stores that Hassan is dedicated to. I don't know what that noise was downstairs. Something just fell. That's kind of scary. The pluggable like webhooks, can convert to webhooks, etc. framework that Muafik's doing. What else is big on the roadmap here that resources are getting dedicated to that we want to bring up?
We can. Okay. So in progress means implementation, I guess, right? Not in design, like active designing is probably in design column.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was just gonna say, like, we're working on those things, but in design also means it's working on that board. So.
Did I miss any of the major features that are, at least getting early starts design or alpha level support in 1.7? Did I miss any?
Actually, there is one. So you see the consider allowing provider partition on provider config.
Yes.
So this specific issue is about a feature request. And an issue that will be opened by Alper will actually ask the question of will state the problem that this specific issue is solving. So that issue is going to be the start of that work. Hey, we have a problem with because provider uses a single service account, and that is making it harder to authenticate with identity configurations of cloud providers. And how can we solve it? And this is one of the proposed solutions. So I think in the next community meeting, we will be able to move, we will be able to have that issue and then put it under InDesign.
That makes sense then.
If you'd like to, you can put a note, but I guess that board is not beta, so you may not be able to.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, that's not. I thought you could do that with the old boards too, but no. Okay, but yeah. So when Alper makes progress on that one, then we can get that included in there.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Anything else for core Crossplane runtime to bring up before we move on to providers? All right. Let's go ahead and move on to Muafik. Were you saying something?
I was just gonna mention a specific issue in Crossplane runtime, but I think we will have room at the end of the community meeting. I'll just keep it to that.
That sounds good. All right, so let's start with providers, and we had talked last time about the major announcement of the TerraJet-based providers being available now, and folks starting to use those, get feedback, etc. So let's get another update here on everything since the last community meeting. And Muafik, maybe, or Matthias, or
yeah, I can give some updates. So the first one is using Schema from CLI, which is Hassan is working on and finishing. It's essentially right now we're importing Terraform provider code bases to get the schema in the Go. But we're moving to a model where we use Terraform CLI to give us the schema JSON, and then we use that as the input for our schema generation, which would enable us not having to import those providers, which usually has like, quirks around like dependencies or somehow internal and stuff. I mean, Hassan can go into more detail. Actually, he's here. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, you pretty much described the work, but maybe I can like just say that it is kind of solving the most problematic part of generating a provider with TerraJet. And yeah, even like the guide is being updated in the same PR, and you can see the difference in the guide as well. Yeah, I hope it will be ready next week or so.
Feel free to drop a link in here as well, because I know there's an issue and
sure.
discussion on this. So we could drop a link so that people coming to the agenda can have more context and read more.
Yeah.
All right.
So for the second one, that is about evaluating use of long-running provider gRPC server. So that's something Alper is working on. So in Terraform, when you run a Terraform apply, it spins up a new gRPC server that is provider, talks with it, and then like shuts it down. So what we're evaluating right now, there is a mode of Terraform that we can keep a provider gRPC server up all the time, and Terraform CLI executions would just talk with that single provider server. So we wouldn't pay the cost of like, bringing it up and down, and also the memory usage of like, different gRPCs, like multiple gRPC servers for Terraform providers working at the same time. So that also has an issue that I will link in a second. But yeah, it's got the images ready, and we are right now testing whether it is actually worth doing that, because it's not like, the production mode of Terraform. It's more like, a development feature that is not documented. So yeah.
I think move off just in case you probably know this, but I believe Casey investigated this pattern back in the day, right? I think that's what he was using.
Yeah. Well, not exactly the same pattern, because he was keeping the gRPC server and talking to it. What we're aiming here is that like, we're going to keep gRPC server and pass a flag to Terraform CLI actually to always talk to that gRPC server instead of like, spinning up and down like, new servers for each request. Yeah, so the next one is CRD scaling status update. So if just to recap, we had some like, scaling problems in Kubernetes regarding the number of CRDs that we're deploying, which is over 500 for certain jet providers. So there were three main problems. One was there was a peak during the installation time related to open API aggregation of the schemas. That would like, make your cluster unusable for like, 40 to 50 minutes, because it would just eat all of your CPU and a lot of memory. And cloud providers would try to scale up their API servers, and during that time you would get like, timeouts and stuff. And that problem is fixed. So we have accelerated process or patching process of that fix, and it's got into like, several patch release and major release of 123. So that is good. But the other two problems, one was continuous load on the API server. So when you deploy like 700 CRDs, you would see like from like 400 megabytes of memory, it would go up to like 4 gigs of memory, continuous memory usage of API server. And the client-side throttling, which would be related to discovery client of kubectl, client Go and kubectl, where if you write like, kubectl gets something, it would query every endpoint in the cluster, which is a lot when you have lots of CRDs, and that would take a lot of time. So right now, what we have seen is that the patch versions made it to cloud providers. And then now we have started like, Alper, I believe he was going to open an issue today, but he will probably open it in the next hour. So I can link it here again to share the data. What we see right now, we don't have the peak of CPU usage, but some of the providers like GKE zonal and GK regional, those have like, you know, really low resources, and the scale up process takes quite a time. So in GK zonal and regional, you would still see some like, you know, it would get into repairing state for a while, and then after the scaling up is done, you would, like, you know, keep using it. For EKS and AKS, there is no problem, like, you know, about them being, like, you know, in a repairing state or something. It's just about, like, you know, how they handle internally the scaling up the API server for the increased memory usage, which is, like, you know, pretty parallelizable, because it's just about HTTP endpoints having memory footprint as far as we know at this point. And that makes client throttling effects go. So when you have a slow API server, then client throttling is even worse, because now every call takes more time. Instead of 20 seconds, you get, like, you know, 1 or 2 minutes in some cases. So yeah, so what is changed from, like, you know, 3 months ago is that we've got the new versions now. We don't see the peak, but the continuous load itself makes some of the API server implementations sweat as well. So what we're going to do is to actually write a design doc, a one-page or design doc, that will, like, you know, list all those findings, everything we have so far, and then add some tooling to reproduce these problems and some ideal exit criteria. Like, you know, hey, this is the request time that we will say, okay, like, you know, we don't have that problem anymore, and the tools to reproduce that and test it. So that's what we're going to do, and you will see more details on the issue. Yeah, that was a long update. Sorry if that was too long. So yeah, and just to note, this affects only, so we have in jet providers, we have 2 versions. One with, like, you know, /preview suffix, which has all the CRDs, AWS 750 or something. But we also have the normal version where we include only the configure resources, which is not that many. I think the maximum we have, they're like 115. So it's safe to use those right away. Yeah, so I'm moving on to the next one, release cadence. So we had a discussion about, like, you know, so the jet providers get like with one PR you can configure, like, you know, 15 or 20 resources, and they would get to V1 Alpha 2. And the question would be, like, you know, hey, should we release now, or, like, you know, should we, like, you know, what do we do? How do we make it to the hand of the users? So that issue discusses release cadences for the most popular, the 3 most popular cloud providers. So yeah, that is in that issue I have suggested, I believe, 6 weeks, but feel free to chime in. I believe next week we will wrap that issue up and add it to the README of those jet providers, that they're going to be released for every 6 weeks. And yeah, I think that's it for the updates. Hassan, if you want to add something, please. Yeah.
No, not really. Maybe we can just mention that, like, there are a good number of projects that started using TerraJet. I think as per GitHub, it says there are 35 repositories that depends on TerraJet as of today. So it's we see a good
25. Wow, that's
30.
awesome.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, we have some cloud providers, and we have even, like, non-cloud providers, like Grafana. I saw other day.
Yeah.
They have an official provider now, Crossplane provider built on TerraJet.
Yeah, it's accelerating a lot of the integration efforts here. It's absolutely accelerating things. That's fantastic. Cool. Those are really useful updates, Wolfgang. Thank you for sharing all those about the TerraJet updates. Really good context to share. Awesome. So let's keep on moving here. And so other recent releases of providers. So Daniel, you added that there's the first official release of DigitalOcean.
Yes. Just base features like droplets, Kubernetes clusters, and database clusters.
That's fantastic, man. Do you have a couple of ideas already of like what other support will be coming down the pipeline in the next releases?
Yeah, since it's near and dear to my heart, since I'm on the storage team, we'll be doing Spaces, which is our S3 offering,
nice.
as well as adding some extra database features, such as like database users and things of that nature. And then to to add to the TerraJet, working on the using our Terraform provider, since it's fairly up to date, to then do also a DigitalOcean TerraJet provider. I can add to the speed. I've essentially already got the equivalent of what I have in the regular provider with TerraJet in like a week.
It's really cool to leverage that. Awesome, man. Thanks for that update, Daniel.
Yeah, I think having the links to providers in the doc would be quite helpful if you mind to share.
And Moffick, were you gonna say something else?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask, I believe, Daniel, it was you that we had a chat in the Crossplane Slack about like, mixing them. So sorry if I missed, like, did you give an update about this, or like, do you plan to do that, or like, what are your thoughts about that?
I think for now we were going to keep them separate until we can look specifically into it. I'm more interested in, like I say, the failings of the TerraJet, or why you would choose one over the other. And then once I can more easily identify that, trying to then bake that into the TerraJet provider instead of maintaining two.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Good. Okay, so then provider AWS, the 0.24 is planned to go out today. So if, Christopher, if you want to share some more context on that one, what's important, what's in that one, and then also in the context of if there are breaking API changes associated with it, then that would be great to know too.
I think nothing really special, but we bumped a few resources to beta. I think Muafak can tell us something about this, but normally we tested this also today in our environments. So the actual stand from the master branch, so 2 hours ago, I think, and it looks very great. So there's nothing in our environments that breaking or something like this. So
yeah, I believe there are lots of new resources in this release as well, and also like some enhancements, especially regarding the RDS. And as Christopher mentioned, it's like, a lot of V1 Beta 1 level support for some of the resources. So yeah, there was one thing about this release, is that it was actually supposed to go out yesterday, but I wanted to include those V1 Beta 1 changes, which are like non-risky at all, into this release, and I was like out of the office yesterday, so we were cutting it today. Which is communicated in the issue. So yeah, no breaking changes, as Christopher said.
Happy birthday, Muafik.
Thank you.
And so for the resources that are maturing to beta, can you give me just like a 30-second refresher update of what actions like consumers of those resources would need to do to start using the beta ones in their environments if they're already out and running?
Yeah, so there are two cases that we handle. One is that you have existing resources with those like SNS subscription and like VP sealing and other stuff. So they're not gonna break at all. They're gonna keep working, and you will have the chance to like we will have the instructions to make them like for the SNS ones. To use the new versions, V1 Beta 1, because they got a rename as well. For others, they will just save it as V1 Beta 1 to the API server. So you can still like, V1 Alpha 1 is still served, but you can just start use in your new YAMLs, you can start to use V1 Beta 1. So the only action you need to take, you don't need to take it right now, which is like, what makes it non-breaking. They're all still served, but in the future, at some point, we will drop V1 Alpha 1 schema. So it's advised that you move to the new version. in your in your file system, in your YAML, because in etcd it's already converted by the API server. And for the SNS ones, old ones will still work, which is not similar to IAM rename that we did. Old ones will still work, and you can move them to the new ones with the instructions in this release or in the next release. We will keep them around for a few.
The SNS ones even too?
Yes, we will. We're planning to keep them for 1 or 2 releases.
And that's why it's different than the v0.22 release with the IAM related ones that changed.
Yeah, in that release, we also kept IAM ones, but we disabled their controllers. In this case, we don't do that, so they'll still be reconciled.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which will give people more time to move. It's I mean, just to be clear, because these were V1 Alpha 1, we did not really have to do that, but we got some feedback from the community that it's easier to have 1 or 2 releases of time at least to do those migrations, even though they're a V1 Alpha 1, because they have been on V1 Alpha 1 for a really long time.
That sounds good. And then being very proactive, like in the release notes, et cetera, to say, hey, these are the changes that are making. You don't have to right now, but doing it sooner than later, so it's not like a fire drill when we're finally completely obsoleting them and removing them. Then you deal with them then. Like being proactive about it is a better situation to be in.
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Okay, that's great. Thank you for that explanation. Christopher, anything else to add from you on Provider AWS, or any new features or anything you want to call out?
So the only thing is, I think in Crossplane in the documentations, we rely on a very old version. There's one open PR from me in the Crossplane, and it looks like that we see more and more in the communities that they're using old providers. So it would be great if we can bump this. You know what I'm referring on?
I'm not. I remember seeing like something in some other docs that was old that that needs to be updated. But yeah, Christopher, if you want to drop a link to that right here, then that sounds like something that if the community keeps running into it, that we definitely should fix.
Yeah, I provided the link in the chat.
Sweet.
So it would be cool if someone can have a look the next days, because we see more and more folks using old providers, and then we see that is from the documentation pages and so on.
Yep, that sounds
because we see really very often the old IAM resources, and then that is because of the using old providers.
Yeah, exactly. And I've run into that a couple of times of something not like a composition not getting rendered out because that old IAM resource doesn't exist, or the identity resource as it were. You see that immediately, you're like, dang, I know what this is. Yep, good point, man. Good point, Christopher.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. Hassan, do you want to get us a quick on Provider GCP?
Yeah, actually, there are not too much activity on Provider GCP side, but there is a long running issue requested by a couple of people, which is supporting workload identity similar to Provider AWS does. So there is an open PR for that. Thanks for opening that from it is a PR coming from community, so it is ready for merge. I'm expecting it to get merged in the following days. And right after it's merged, I think we will cut a release in Provider GCP. So that is also another thing to expect. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, awesome. I was really excited to see that PR as well, or to enable identity stuff too. That was pretty cool.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so to be conscious of time, so 15 minutes left here. Let's keep on moving. Is for Provider Azure, is Sergen here to give a quick little update on that one, or?
I added that actually. So I think Sergen or Alper, that they're not here at this moment, but one of the big things that we might start doing it's not for certain yet, is that we might be able to move to the new Azure identity libraries and APIs. So Sergen said, like, in the morning he had a time to look into this, like, to see, like, what it would take. Yeah. I think there are other updates as well, but that is what I had in mind.
Thanks for sharing that then on their behalf. Dan, you wanted to talk about fat packages?
Yeah, since we're pretty far along, I'll keep this really short. But basically, now that we support them, it would be, in my mind, and I think in some other folks' mind, a simpler experience for there just to be one image produced for a provider on a build and be able to push that. There is some tooling that needs to go in place to make that a reality. But we could likely, since all of the providers are using similar tooling, introduce that pretty quickly. It also would be backwards compatible because of the fact that you can omit the controller image now. So just because we supported them doesn't mean that you couldn't use them with old versions of Crossplane. So anyway, if people have big concerns about doing that for some reason, which I certainly don't anticipate, but if you do, please let me know.
Good, Daniel. I like the thinking on that one. Perfect. All right, keep on moving along here. Nick, looks like you inserted something at the top of the community section.
Sorry, I have to head off in a minute, so I wanted to get this in. Just a heads up that something that Jared and Bassam and I, who are we have a steering committee for this project, who sort of the leadership of the governance team. So we help maintainers coordinate across repositories and just sort of act as tiebreakers, and in the case that there are disagreements, which I don't think has ever actually happened, so is hypothetical, but we were chatting the other day and we kind of realized there's not any great forums to get in touch with the steering committee for Crossplane. If folks want to reach out, we see every now and again, folks from other open source projects wanting to chat and figure out, hey, is there a way for our projects to collaborate or something like that? And we think the steering committee is a good place for those folks to go, among other use cases. So long story short, we're doing a little bit of improvement on the steering committee, and two things that are very likely to happen is, one, we're going to have some more obvious forums to get in touch with us rather than just, like, I don't know, DMing Jared and Bassam and I on Slack. So we'll probably set up separate steering committee sessions from these community meetings, as well as have like a mailing list or something to contact us. And the other thing, the other first thing that we identified that we wanted to do is we've never really made an easily discoverable charter for the Crossplane project, like to sort of really specify its vision and what it's for. It's pretty easy to discover what it is. It's kind of at the top of our README, and it's in the CNCF documents we put together, but we are going to actually, or I'm going to take a pass at writing a charter this week. So just a heads up, look forward to some a more active steering committee going forward.
Awesome, Nick. Thanks for sharing that update there. Cool. Then I like this section here every week where we have collected all the different writings and blog posts and live streams and videos, etc., about Crossplane. We don't need to get into all of these, of course, but they are all available here for your perusal if you want to dive into them. Of special note, I think, are the part 2 and part 3 of the deep dives into the Terrajet providers and runtime that Hassan and Alper wrote. Muafik had done part 1 of the deep dives, and that was available for the last community meeting, so you can refer to it there. But then part 2 and part 3 are out now. Dan wrote a particularly interesting blog post about the missing Kubernetes type system that is quite compelling and thought-provoking, so feel free to jump into that one as well. And then Aaron has continued his series on testing Crossplane packages. So he did a tester and development one that we had seen in the last community meeting, and now he's talking about performance testing and some strategies there. And then finally, Nate worked on a reference platform, a configuration package for Azure to join the other ones that we have, such as AWS, GCP, a multi-cloud Kubernetes one, etc. So you can read about that latest reference platform too that Nate wrote about. Cool. And then, yeah, some other great stuff there, obviously. So all the links are available. So custom compositions, work has started on this in earnest now. And so Nick, you want to give us a quick note on your progress there with Sergen?
There is a link to a document that has our brainstorming, saying progress has started in earnest. Feels a little bit strong. We have been doing research and development on it. That's about it. What the most interesting thing is that we are actually starting a separate breakout session for this. That is if you click through the link from this document here. You'll see that there's another document. We're meeting at 9 p.m. PST on, which is depending on where you are in Europe, pretty early in the morning. Just because Sergen and I are the main folks working on this, and we don't have a lot of overlap time zone wise. And we wanted to open it up for everyone to join. I would say please do join if you like really are interested in this topic, and like especially if you think you might want to help out with it or something like that. I'd love to keep the forum relatively small, so everyone's welcome, but definitely more welcome if you if you want to come and help out rather than just like hang out and see what we're doing. But so yeah, maybe more updates next week. On at the moment, it's really just sort of exploration and note swapping and alignment between Sergen and I.
Cool. That's great progress to me, in my opinion. So I'm glad you all are getting going on that one and opening up for folks to participate as well, because it certainly is a pretty important feature. And getting the experience in the API like to a great place is going to be really important. And I got a lot of faith in you all to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think the biggest technical challenge with it at the moment, and it just occurred to me that I'll just throw this out there in the interest of crowdsourcing technical solutions. The biggest challenge that we're facing at the moment is that we are thinking about using KRM functions, which is something that KPT and Customize use. Which basically allows you to just put, in our case, composition logic inside a pipeline of OCI images or OCI containers. But actually executing those sort of server side in Kubernetes is challenging. If you want to, let's say someone has like 4 containers and they want to pipe stood in from one to stood out to another one. I could imagine us just spinning up 4 pods or whatever and storing state between them. That's pretty slow to do for reconciling. So long story short, if anyone has any great ideas there about how to do that, hit me up. I'll give you credit in the design doc.
Nice. Yeah, that is the interesting technical problem. Okay, cool. Then so for KubeCon EU, which is like May 15th or something in Valencia, Spain. Quick updates for everybody is that I have signed us up for a maintainer track session. As an incubating project, we get a session there that we get to present and do intro, deep dive sort of stuff. I've also signed us up for some of the project benefits you get for being part of the CNCF. So I signed us up for a project kiosk, they call it, which is another name for a booth. Doing a virtual office hours component is because that has been massively successful, I think, in the previous KubeCons. So I would love us to do that again, and then getting some PR support from the CNCF for any announcements that we might have then. I don't know exactly what we'll be announcing in May, but I have a feeling with some of these large features we're undertaking that having support from the CNCF to amplify some of those messages there, that'll be pretty good too. So the thing to note here is that, they have language that they haven't had before, I think, around like guaranteed acceptance. Like signing up for them does not mean we'll definitely get one, but I've put in everything that we can to get. And so hopefully we'll get, at least some combination of these opportunities for KubeCon. So, since there are multiple opportunities, that means there's multiple, chances for people to participate as well. So especially, I think, around the virtual office hours, there will be opportunities for folks from the community to speak and present and participate in that. So if you're interested in speaking on behalf of the Crossplane project and sharing your expertise with the attendees to those sessions, then that's open for folks to join in. Just reach out to me. Cool. And then I'm going to organize some sort of get together as well in Valencia. So there'll be more information on that one, but I just wanted to start putting some feelers out for, contributors to the community and being able to get together and spend some time, which would be really cool. So be on the lookout for that as well. Yep. So KubeCon's a few months away, but always planning to do for that stuff. Okay, so then I don't see any specific links to anything else on the agenda, but Moaf, I remember you saying that you had something that you might bring up later on, an issue or something.
Yeah, there it is. I'll just copy it. So the issue is that I believe Christopher is also aware of it. So in AWS, we have some resources that reference the same kind. For example, in security group, you can actually refer to the same security group in your egress roles. So, and it's because it's ID is decided by the cloud provider, by AWS. We don't start with reconciliation because we can't resolve that reference, and reference cannot be resolved because it is not able to find the external name on the same resource. So we've got this kind of circular dependency. It is not very common, but it happens. So there is one issue about this, hey, what should we do about this? And I propose that we can have an optional policy field on the reference struct. By default, it would be by default like today required, but you would be able to make it optional so that even though that reference is not resolved, the reconciliation pass would move forward, create the result, and the next reconciliation, it would find the value that it would require. And then it can make other calls that it wants. So yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. So now I'm trying to find the agenda link.
I added the issue, I think.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, thanks. Yep.
Add this one here.
Yeah, so
it's a very common use. It's a very common use case. If you, for example, want to use glue in AWS, you need the self-referencing security groups also, for example. Otherwise, you can't start working with the glue jobs and so on. So
yeah. So feel free to chime in, and please do let us know, if that proposal does that make sense, or you have some concerns. I think this could be something pretty impactful, but also straightforward in terms of implementation. Also, I would call out if anyone is interested in actually implementing it, feel free to drop a comment on the issue. It's going to be it will land on Crossplane runtime repo, I believe.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. It's self-referential links. Well, yeah, thanks for bringing that up and mentioning a potential way to approach that problem.
Yep.
All right. Cool. So I think that's the end of the agenda, Doc. Here, I don't see anything else that we haven't covered. So pretty much right on time, it looks like. Any parting words or anything else that anybody needs to bring up before we adjourn for the week?
one small PR in provider jet AWS. I implemented the assume role on for multi-account assuming roles. Would be great if we can see track on it, because we want to use also the jet providers in our environments, and we have a lot of AWS accounts. Otherwise, we are stuck on only one account.
Yeah, I'll make sure to review it tomorrow, or at the latest beginning of the next week. I believe I took a look at it. It's very straightforward, because we already use the authentication methods from provider AWS native one.
Yep.
So it's yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Yep.
Well, thanks everybody for attendance today. Yes,
Jared, I think there is one last item which is added by, I guess, Ricardo, asking for some good first issues.
Oops, I'm sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just looking for some guys. I know that you folks have a good first issue, whatever, in GitHub, but just wondering, besides that, if there's anything that there's a focus, because I know how projects work, where the issues that start piling up, and it's hard to groom and some things may show up as good first issue, and there may have been, already fixed or whatever. Just wondering, if there's anything that I can just chime in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question, Ricky. And then yeah, like you already noticed like the good first issue label, but I think that's probably not kept up to date completely with the backlog. Typically, what I have seen is that a lot of times first contributions will be around like adding a new support for a new resource using code generation stuff. So either in one of the TerraJet providers, like adding like maturing one of the resources from V1 Alpha 1 to V1 Alpha 2, and there's a guide on that, or like in provider AWS using the ACK code generation stuff to add support for a new resource. So that's typically one common path for new contributors. And that one also.
Do you keep like a list between, what's actually in Crossplane and what's actually missing, in the, corresponding provider to see, hey, what are the missing gaps, so I can just, go ahead and.
Yeah, I don't know if there's going to be like an explicit missing list, but the doc.crds.dev site is super useful to see like what are the what is there right now, and like resources that you want to add is it could be you can cross-reference it there and see very quickly if it's there or not. Like for instance, provider AWS like this, you can see it's got 119 resources there. Here's all the API groups, the kinds, the version, and stuff. So this is a great way to explore what is there right now.
Gotcha. And if I understand correctly, the provider dash whatever is kind of like the stable thing, and the new way of doing things may seem like it's like the TerraJet kind of project, right? Or am I getting that wrong?
Yeah, there's a whole write-up on that. So I'll let Wafik handle that more directly right here. And then, but there is like a provider strategy write-up that's we'll be able to give details as well.
Gotcha.
You can
Okay.
yeah you can find the design folder of Crossplane. Yeah. All
right. Oh, okay. Thanks, Daniel. Yep. I'll get a look.
Awesome, Ricky. Yeah, and if there's one thing I was gonna say is that a lot of times adding new resources is demand driven. So like, hey, something that you want to use, so you want to see it, then that's a common way that people get involved too. So something you want to see in the project, feel free to chat with us and get some feedback on ideas.
That's good. Yeah, I just trying to get hold of how you actually work out. If it's more like a Slack driven rather than hey everything it's in GitHub, just go out there and look. So yeah, okay, sounds good.
Awesome, Ricky. Glad to have you on the community, man.
Yep.
All right. Thanks everybody. Good to see everybody, and we'll adjourn here and see you in a couple weeks.
Yeah.